So the last few hours of the Anthem public demo were quite interesting, and we got the chance to see a new type of event that we didn't see before. In case you were up and playing at the time and managed to get into the free play mode, you might have seen and experienced a number of very strange occurrences. The first one was of course the massive firestorm affecting a huge portion of the skies, throwing bolts of fire and causing severe lightning. Then there were the high number of titans spawning in certain parts of the map, and even the overall background music was changed to a more dramatic and very cool soundtrack. Now all of this was teased about a week prior to this event, when Bioware announced something special would be happening in the final hours of the public demo that shows a small glimpse of what is to come. Michael Gamble then later explained in a Twitter post that this event was caused by Shaper technology starting to go off the rails. When that happens, weird things pop up, more dangerous creatures fill the lands, but that was not the worst it can get. Earlier than that, Casey Hudson announced that this was a mini event and just a small tease of some of the things that we'll get to see when the game goes live. So by all accounts, this looks and feels pretty much like the Shaper storms we've been anticipating for a while now, and from the looks of it, we will get to experience them in-game on launch day. They also appear to be of various degrees in severity. Obviously the one that we had this weekend was something small scale, as this is just a demo anyway, with bigger ones probably featuring the level of chaos we've seen in the 2017 gameplay trailer. It is also noteworthy that the storm itself was actually far away from the area of the map we had access to, yet it still caused titans to spawn in crazy amounts of numbers on that part of the map. If that is what a small-scale Shaper storm looks like, I'm very curious to see how the large-scale one feels, especially if you're in the center of it, and even more so, what types of enemies does it really spawn. I've tested the event out and I've defeated about a dozen or so titans in the time I had with it, and honestly it felt very fun, but most importantly it felt very rewarding in terms of loot, which is why I think most people will be interested in these events. There were titans of various sizes, from regular ones to elites and even massive legendary ones. Dealing with them was sometimes challenging, sometimes easier, even on the highest difficulty, but that most probably had to do with the fact that I was already very well geared for that level and knew all of their attack patterns by heart. I imagine that higher levels and difficulty options will make them much harder, as they only really have a couple of weaknesses, and even those right before doing some very damaging attacks. The fact that these events can be brought up with ease on the live servers though makes me very hopeful about the amount of content we'll get to see at launch. Well, that and of course a few more statements given on the subject a few hours ago by various people over at Bioware, and I think you'll all be interested in this. So the content at launch looks to be much more substantial than we initially thought and what was took out of context from various interviews. Michael Gamble once more took it over on Twitter and brought a list of some of the things we can expect on launch. We have the full story with amazing cutscenes and performances, which was already implied. 3 4th Tarsus agents with full story arcs for each of them, some of which don't open up until the main story is finished. Free play with open world events and variants in a world that can be changed at a moment's notice, and we've got to experience a glimpse of that with the final demo event. Then there's the 4th Tarsus itself, with characters to talk to, make decisions, and continuing after the main story is done. 6 additional optional missions related to the critical path, of which 3 we already experienced in the demo, and I will say that some of these missions, especially the one with the spider bot boss, felt about as long as regular sized dungeons, so having more of that is a huge plus for me. On top of this, there's also a reputation challenge for the various factions that currently exist in the game, including of course the Arcanists, the Freelancers, and finally the Sentinels, but there is a wink in there that there is going to be much more than this. According to another Twitter post from the same person, doing missions, making conversation choices, and free play events will give you specific points for each of these factions. These points apply to challenges, which unlock crafting blueprints and other goodies. They also change the look of your personal 4th Tarsus, and this is where I'm getting excited because I really want to see what type of stuff you can apply to the fort itself, how much can you change, and how personalized can you make it. But in total there's going to be 3 challenges associated with each of the 3 factions in the game, so a total of 9 on launch day, and this is of course before the end game. All of this is before like the strongholds, which have been confirmed to be only 3 so far. We currently only know of the Tyrant Mine, the Temple of Scar, and the third one that has yet to be shown. alone, but there might be more. There also seems to be a quite extensive amount of talk about post-launch content in a handful of interviews, with most of the team already being engaged in creating new content, including new zones, which makes me believe that Bioware is planning to bring in content as soon as possible after launch, and we already kinda saw that with the recent fanbase suggestion which came in the form of the launch bay, but of course that is just a small feature. There might be more than just that. We really want to see more in terms of big encounters. And speaking of big encounters, one of the post-launch content I was talking about in the previous video was of course the seasonal event called Cataclysms, which we kinda now have a somewhat confirmation that this is not just a rename of the Shaper Storms as I initially anticipated, and in fact they appear to be two completely separate types of content. It might very well be that these Cataclysms, which will start and last for a period of time, be it weeks or months, might very well contain these Shaper Storm events, but the end goal of the Cataclysms is still to bring in that raid-like content to Anthem on a larger scale, complexity and difficulty compared to Strongholds. So yes, there is something beyond these Strongholds, and there are going to be some announcements soon. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of talk about it on Twitter, and the developers have said that they will be announcing more on these things soon, but yeah, hopefully it does happen in the next couple of weeks because, well, we don't really have anything else to do in the meantime. Now, in terms of fixes and balancing, there's more to that coming in the full game on top of the 1000 plus that will already being talked about. Since the game has technically two launch dates, one for the 22nd and one for the 15th for the Premier members, these will all be brought up in waves according to Michael Gamble's recent Twitter post, with some being brought up for the early access on the 15th, while the other ones for the full release on the 22nd. So yes, even the early access might still have a few problems, but generally it should be way better than the demo, which is at this point months old. I specifically want to also talk about some of the balancing issues and fixes coming to the game, as it seems that a lot of people found some of the classes feeling off, especially when they're referring to the Colossus. It goes without saying that many of the items, abilities and core stats for all of the classes had problems, not just the Colossus, but that was probably the most affected of them all because the Colossus heavily relies on his health bar, as he is lacking an energy shield he can auto regenerate. What this means is that you can't really quickly disengage in combat, but rather you are forced to stay on the front lines, which makes you a prime target to die if you're not playing it carefully. Overall, balancing has been confirmed to be brought up in the game starting on the 15th. The dreadful NPC despawn bug was also addressed, with testing still being underway to ensure it's 100% removed. From what I was able to dig out, this was caused by a combination of factors, which include NPCs not being aggroed by the player enough, and the servers trying to manage the spawn rates to increase the overall system performance. So yeah, the server was acting up, despawning them to save performance and not realizing that they are actually aggroed by the player. So yeah, pretty much that. The reason there was no fix applied to this to the live servers was to not risk having other issues appear in the process, and I think that is a good decision. It didn't plague many of the encounters, it was just something that occurred sporadically and it mostly affected free play, so I can see why this was not a priority. There have also been a number of exploits that made certain characters downright overpowered or even broken, and I'm specifically going to talk about the Storm, which had a very interesting one. If you didn't catch what I just showed you in the footage, that was me casting the Storm ultimate about a dozen or so times more than the 3 maximum you're usually allowed to. So yeah, that was like 5 or 6 ultimates into one ultimate combined. With this, a Storm player could literally annihilate even the strongest foe out there by simply spamming his already high damaging ultimate ability. So yeah, that was one of them. There were also various melee exploits in there as well, one of which would let javelins, even non-interceptors, to spam their melee attacks without any cooldown. So yeah, hopefully that gets addressed in the full game. But with that, I think I've covered all of the latest details we found out. Anthem so far looks pretty good to me, and I only ever had problems when playing with randoms via the matchmaking system. When I played with my own crew, I had absolutely zero issues, I had no disconnects, no loading screens, no crashes or anything else, so all of it was most probably server-sided and had to do with the way my internet service provider works. If you're undecided about purchasing the game right now, what you can do is simply wait for the reviews and first gameplay impressions to come out. Additionally, you can take part in the Anthem giveaway that is still going on my channel, and you can do so by following the links down below. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, a like would be super appreciated. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more of Anthem, and I'll see you guys later.